Part 1. The Dawn of Connection, Migration, Agriculture, and Empire's Introduction, the Scope of History. Look at the world today. 7 billion lives, connected by glass, wire, and commerce. We measure history in weeks, in days, in social media seconds. But the story of global history is not a story of individual events. It's a sweeping drama of shared human themes, the forces that have woven us together and torn us apart over millennia. This series will explore those threads: power, exchange, ideas, and survival. To understand the present, we must begin at the root, with movement. Out of Africa, the first great migration, the first great theme of global history is migration. For hundreds of thousands of years, humanity was defined by movement. From our origins in East Africa, small bands of hunter-gatherers began the slow, arduous walk that would eventually populate every habitable corner of the planet. This vast, decentralized expansion was driven by necessity, following game, escaping drought, searching for a better life. It was a history without borders, a history of pure, nomadic survival. The Neolithic Revolution, settlement and surplus. Then, around 10,000 years ago, everything changed. In scattered locations, the Fertile Crescent, the Yangtze River Valley, Mesoamerica, people began to domesticate plants and animals. This was the Neolithic Revolution. For the first time, humans stopped chasing their food and started producing it. Movement gave way to settlement. This simple act of putting down roots created a surplus of food, and that surplus had two profound consequences. Consequences of density, civilization and pathogens. First, specialization. Not everyone needed to farm anymore. Some became potters, soldiers, or priests. This was the birth of civilization. Second, density. When people and their animals live together in close quarters, new, devastating forces are unleashed. The great exchange of history wasn't just goods and ideas, it was disease. The crowded conditions of early civilizations were the perfect breeding ground for future pandemics. The rise of empire, organizing power, the surplus of food and the specialization of labor led inevitably to a new, defining theme: power. As civilizations grew, they coalesced into the first large-scale political systems, empires. The empires of Rome in the west, the Han dynasty in the east, and the Mauryans in India were not isolated phenomena. They were monumental attempts to manage vast territories and diverse populations under a single, central authority. They standardized law, language, and currency, and in doing so, they created the arteries of history. The roots of trade, like the Great Silk Road, that would soon link the world together for the first time. Part 2, the Age of Exchange, Religion, Trade, and Pandemic, placeholder for deep expansion, the spread of ideas. Expand here on the rise and impact of universalizing religions, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, as forces that connected people and trade across vast territories. The Mongol Connector, the Pax Mongolica. The Age of Exchange was the pivotal era where the world's major landmasses began to truly interact, bound by ideology and commerce, only to be struck down by the biological cost of that new connectivity. The transition was defined by a massive, violent, and ultimately unifying force: the Mongol Empire. In the early 13th century, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, a collection of nomadic tribes burst forth from the steppes of Central Asia, creating the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever known. The Mongols themselves did not invent a new ideology or a new technology. Their greatest contribution to global history was connection. The Eurasian Superhighway. Their conquests shattered the boundaries of older civilizations and welded them into a single, vast, security zone, often called the Pax Mongolica. This zone guaranteed the safety of travelers and merchants from the Mediterranean all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Suddenly, the fragmented trade routes of the past became a superhighway. Goods, artists, diplomats, and, most importantly, ideas flowed across Eurasia as never before. Italian merchants like Marco Polo traveled deep into China, bringing back tales of unimaginable wealth and technological sophistication. Printing, gunpowder, and the compass, innovations long confined to East Asia, began to filter westward, demonstrating the incredible potential of a truly connected world. The biological backlash, the Black Death, but this new, rapid connectivity came with a profound, terrifying cost. The same roads that carried silk, spices, and scholarship also served as a perfect, invisible highway for the greatest single demographic catastrophe in human history. The exchange of goods was inevitably accompanied by the exchange of pathogens. The intense commercial traffic of the Mongol era brought the bacterium Yersinia pestis into constant, close contact with human populations along the new trade routes. Apocalyptic consequences. The plague first erupted on a massive scale in the 1330s in China and traveled west with frightening speed. By 1347, the Black Death had arrived in Europe. Within just 5 years, between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population of Europe perished, with similarly devastating mortality rates across the Islamic world and parts of Asia. The consequences were not just demographic, they were revolutionary. The sudden, massive loss of life flipped the rigid feudal economic structure on its head. Labor became scarce and expensive. The power of the aristocratic landowner was irrevocably weakened, accelerating the shift toward a more dynamic, market-based economy. Furthermore, the plague profoundly shook the foundational ideologies of the era, contributing to the intellectual environment that would eventually foster the Renaissance. The world that emerged from the plague was fundamentally different, ready for the next wave of global acceleration. Part 3: Global Convergence, Exploration and Exploitation. The Maritime Leap. The next great theme was a biological and economic convergence driven by sea power. By the 15th century, the demand for Asian goods in Europe was unquenched, spurring the search for new, direct maritime routes. Technological shifts, the sturdy caravel, the improved astrolabe, and more accurate cartography, made oceanic voyages possible, culminating in the voyages of Columbus, da Gama, and Magellan. They were driven by God, gold, and glory. The invisible invasion, biological cataclysm. The first act of global convergence in 1492 was an involuntary, biological cataclysm. When Europeans stepped onto the shores of the Americas, they brought with them an unseen army of pathogens. Smallpox, measles, influenza, typhus, diseases that had co-evolved with dense European and Asian populations for millennia, met populations with absolutely no genetic resistance. The devastation was swift and absolute. Within a century and a half, the native population of the Americas plummeted by an estimated 90%. This was not just a tragedy, it was a fundamental reorganization of the human map. This demographic vacuum profoundly shaped everything that followed. It made European conquest vastly easier, but it also fueled the need for a new labor source, setting in motion the cruelest engine of the New World System. The Columbian Exchange, the global kitchen. But the convergence was also an incredible biological bounty. This exchange, now famously known as the Columbian Exchange, shuffled the deck of global food production forever. Crops native to the Americas, like the potato, maize, corn, cassava, and sweet potato, were energy-dense, highly adaptable, and traveled across the oceans, fundamentally altering the diets, and consequently, the population capacity, of Eurasia and Africa. The humble food crop may be the single greatest, non-human theme in global history. Conversely, the Old World sent its own vital elements westward: wheat, sugar, and coffee. Most critically, it sent livestock like the horse, cattle, and pigs, which radically reshaped the American landscape and way of life. The engine of exploitation, sugar and silver. This new global exchange required a new global economy. The key commodity of this era was not gold, but sugar. An addictive luxury for the European consumer, sugar demanded a vast, year-round workforce. The massive depletion of the indigenous labor force, combined with the profitability of plantation cash crops, created an insatiable demand for labor. The solution, engineered by European powers, was the most horrific episode of the era. The transatlantic slave trade was not a side effect of global convergence, it was its engine. For over 4 centuries, between 10 and 15 million Africans were forcibly removed from their homes, stripped of their freedom, and transported across the brutal Middle Passage. This trade created the wealth that financed European empires, built the infrastructure of the Americas, and left a wound that defines the politics and economies of 3 continents to this day. The flow of silver, mined by coerced labor in Potosi and carried by the Manila galleons across the Pacific, became the first global currency, truly linking Asia, the Americas, and Europe into a single, cohesive economic web. Part 4, The Accelerating World, Revolutions and Industry. The New Light, the Enlightenment. The accelerating world begins not with a war, but with an idea. By the mid-18th century, the intellectual currents crystallized into the Enlightenment, a faith in human reason as the primary source of authority. Thinkers like Locke and Rousseau challenged the divine right of kings, championing natural rights, life, liberty, and property. These were weapons forged to dismantle the ancient structures of aristocracy and absolute monarchy. The fire of political revolution. The first laboratory for these ideas was the American Revolution of 1776, the first successful attempt to construct a government based explicitly on Enlightenment principles. But it was the French Revolution 13 years later that truly shattered the old order of Europe, spreading the revolutionary concept of the nation-state across the entire continent. The age of the universal kingdom was ending, the age of the self-aware nation was beginning. The ultimate contradiction, Haiti, the most radical, and often overlooked, chapter of this political acceleration took place in the Caribbean. In the Haitian Revolution, 1791-1804, enslaved people heard the talk of rights of man and took it literally. Led by figures like Toussaint Louverture, the Haitian Revolution was the only successful slave revolt in world history that led to the formation of a state. It exposed the hypocrisy at the heart of the Enlightenment, that the abstract ideals of liberty were often reserved only for white, propertied men. The Machine Age, the Industrial Revolution. As the political revolutions redefined who held power, the Industrial Revolution was underway. This was the moment human history pivoted from the speed of the animal to the relentless pace of the machine. Built on coal, iron, and the power of the steam engine, this revolution created unprecedented wealth but also terrible poverty for the new working class, the proletariat. Furthermore, it transformed distance. Railroads and steamships turned the world's oceans from barriers into superhighways. The world shrank, but the power dynamic within it became grotesquely distended. Nationalism and the nation-state. As industrial power soared, so did a powerful new ideology, nationalism. The idea that a people who share a common identity should govern themselves in an independent nation-state became the dominant political organizing principle of the 19th century. This force was constructive in unifying countries like Germany and Italy, but it was also intensely divisive, tearing apart multi-ethnic empires like the Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian dynasties. Nationalism taught citizens to identify not with a monarch or a religion, but with the collective destiny of their nation. The final grasp: new imperialism. The combination of industrial technology and nationalistic fervor culminated in the final, rapid stage of globalization, the new imperialism. Driven by a relentless need for raw materials and new markets, European powers launched a desperate, armed land grab across the globe. The ultimate symbol was the scramble for Africa, where European diplomats literally drew lines on a map, dividing an entire continent based on European interests. This system was designed to benefit the imperial center exclusively. It fundamentally distorted the economies of the colonized world, forging a global system of dominator and dominated. The road to war: the powder keg. By the dawn of the 20th century, the forces unleashed by the accelerating world, industrial might, hyper-nationalism, and a globally competitive imperial system, had created a colossal powder keg. The great powers engaged in a ruinous arms race, forming a complex, rigid system of military alliances. The world had never been richer or more interconnected, and yet, this very acceleration had concentrated competition and resentment to a breaking point. Part 5: The Modern Era, Conflict, Technology, and Interdependence. The Great Shattering, World War I. The powder keg ignited in 1914. World War I was the first truly industrialized war, a horrifying clash where technological progress was applied entirely to the organized slaughter of human beings. It became a total war, killing over 20 million people and collapsing 4 ancient empires. The war that was meant to be brief mainly sowed the seeds of resentment that would germinate into a far greater conflict. Ideology and annihilation. World War II. The true global test came in 1939 with World War II, a conflict fought not just over territory, but over ideology. It introduced systematic, state-sponsored genocide, the Holocaust, and culminated in the ultimate escalation of industrial destruction, the use of atomic weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When the dust settled in 1945, global power was consolidated into 2 titanic, competing spheres: the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. The new war of ideas, the Cold War. The resulting Cold War was a contest of systems. For 50 years, the globe was essentially divided into 2 camps, separated by the Iron Curtain. This was a war of spies, of proxies, of technological one-upmanship, defined by the constant, existential threat of mutual nuclear destruction. The conflict played out in the newly independent nations of the Global South, turning regional struggles for liberation into deadly proxy wars. The tides of freedom, decolonization. Simultaneously, a massive wave of decolonization swept across Asia and Africa. Exhausted by war, Europe lacked the will and the resources to maintain its grip. Beginning with India in 1947, new nations gained independence, a triumph for the theme of self-determination. The world stage became truly global, but the challenges were immense: political instability, civil conflict, and neocolonialism, where economic levers replaced physical occupation. The end of history. The digital age. The Cold War ended not with a bang, but with the astonishing, swift collapse of the Soviet Union around 1991. Into this suddenly unipolar world, a final, powerful acceleration took place: the digital revolution. The personal computer, the cell phone, and the Internet created a level of human connection and surveillance that was unimaginable even a generation earlier. The dark side of connectivity, the very hyper-connectivity that created economic prosperity, also created new vulnerabilities. The rise of non-state actors, empowered by technology and motivated by radical ideology, showed that conflict was far from over. The defining theme of the 21st century is interdependence. A virus starting in one market can cripple economies worldwide. We are more reliant on one another than at any point in history, but this reliance does not guarantee harmony. Inequality and populism. The global convergence brought massive overall wealth, yet it simultaneously accelerated economic inequality. This gap, combined with rapid technological change, has fueled a new wave of political fragmentation. Citizens in many nations feel that the globalized system no longer works for them, resulting in a retreat into populism and nationalism, echoes of the divisive forces that led to the world wars. The ultimate challenge: climate change. The greatest and most unprecedented challenge to global history comes not from other human beings, but from the cumulative weight of our own existence. Climate change is the first truly universal crisis in history. It does not respect borders, ideology, or wealth. It threatens the stability of food supplies, accelerates mass migration, and places an enormous burden on the very global systems designed to manage order. Epilogue: the human story. The story of global history is a relentless narrative of convergence. From the first footsteps out of Africa to the digital net, humanity has always sought connection. That connection has brought devastating conflict and unimaginable exploitation, but it has also brought scientific progress, shared art, and collective liberation. The major themes, power, exchange, ideas, and survival, remain in constant tension. The challenge for the future is to apply the hard-won lessons of the past, to turn our unprecedented global capacity for connection into a global capacity for cooperation.